Intro to arrays. In this video, we will introduce the array data structure. Scenario 1. Suppose there are 5 students in my class, and I want to store each of their exam scores in a variable. Based on what we've learned so far in this course, the only way to do that would be to declare 5 separate integers to store each exam score. Scenario number 2. Suppose there are 10 students in my class, and I want each exam score stored inside of a variable. Once again, in this case, I'm going to need 10 separate integer variables. Now, scenario 3. Suppose there are 100 students in my class, and I want each of their scores stored inside of a variable. Now I'm going to need 100 separate integers in order to be able to store each one. As you can see, as the data grows larger, the more tedious it becomes to manage. And the more tedious programs become, the more prone to mistakes they become. All of this data would be much easier to manage if it could be contained inside a single object. This is where arrays come in. An array is an object that stores a fixed number of values, all of the same data type. That being said, let's go back to scenario 1, where we had 5 students in the class and we wanted each of their scores stored inside of a variable. Rather than declare 5 separate integer variables to store each score, we're going to declare one array. Now, how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to decide is what type of array do we want. Since our array is going to store exam scores, that means we want an integer array. And the way we let the compiler know that this is going to be an integer array and not just a single integer is by typing brackets after the word int. The brackets means array. After that, we're going to type the name of the array, the same way we give names to all variables. In this case, since the array is going to be storing exam scores, we're going to call it grades. Then, on the other side of the equal sign, we're going to type the new keyword, the same keyword we use when initializing all objects, all variable types. Then, we're going to type the word int and the number of integers we want inside of our array, inside a pair of brackets. Since we want just 5 scores for this scenario, we're going to declare an array of 5 integers. When this code gets compiled, 5 consecutive unused blocks of memory will be assigned to the grades variable. At the top of the screen is an illustration to help give you an idea of what's going on. Once again, 5 consecutive unused blocks of memory will be assigned to the grades variable when this code gets initiated. Each block will be assigned a number called its index, starting at 0. So the first block will have index 0, the second block index 1, the third block index 2, so on and so forth. The most important thing to remember is that the first block always has index 0. Then each block will be automatically assigned the default value of an integer, 0. Anytime you create an array this way, whether it's an integer array or a double array or a Boolean array or a string array, so on and so forth, the initial value for each block in your array will be the default value for whichever type of values the array is storing. That all being said, now that each spot in our array has its initial value, how do we update it? How do we change it? For example, suppose I want to change the first value in the array from 0 to 75. How do I do that? Well, the first step is to type the name of the array. Then I need to type the index that I want to change. Since I want to change the first value in the array, I'm going to type bracket 0 because 0 is the index of the location I want to change. Then on the other side of the equal sign is the number I want to store there. And the number I want stored there is 75. Thus, 75 gets stored at index 0 once that code compiles. Now suppose I want to change the second value. Once again, type the name of the array and the index that I want to change, which in this case is 1. 1 is the index for the second value. Then on the other side of the equal sign, the number I want stored there, 97. When that code gets compiled, 97 gets stored at that location in the array. Same approach for any location in the array. Anytime I want to change a value in the array, type the name of the array, followed by the index you want changed. Then on the other side of the equal sign, type the value you want stored there. And then that will update the array. What you just saw here is an example of initializing an array to have nothing but default values at the very beginning, then afterwards assigning the specific values we want the array to have one by one. Rather than having those specific values assigned one by one, there is a way to create the array such that it would be initialized to having those specific values in the exact order that you want it. We do this with an initializer list. Initializer lists are used when we want the elements in our array to be initialized to have specific values rather than the default value. So how do we create an initializer list? Well, on the left side of the equal sign, we're doing the exact same thing. We're going to type the type of the array we want, followed by a pair of brackets and the name of the array. Then on the right side of the equal sign, we're going to type new int bracket. And we're leaving the brackets empty. Rather than put a number, we're going to put just a pair of brackets. Then, inside a pair of curly brackets, we're going to type each value we want the array to store initially, separated by a comma. This line of code tells the array to store 75, 97, 71, 88, and 83 in that order. The initializer list is just one of two ways to create an array. The approach you decide to use will depend on the program. For some situations, the initializer list is the best way to go. And for other situations, starting your array off with nothing but default values will be the best way to go. That all being said, suppose I want to use one of the values in the array. Suppose that I want to access it. For example, suppose I want to print out the third value in the array. Well, to print out the third value, I need to type the name of the array followed by the index of the value I want to access. Since I want access to the third value, I'm going to type 2 inside the bracket because 2 is the index of the third value. When I execute that line, 71 gets printed to the screen because that's the value at index 2. Similarly, suppose I want to access a value in the array to store inside of a variable. Once again, I'm going to type the name of the array followed by the index of the value that I want stored. Since I want the fourth value stored inside a variable, I'm going to type 3 inside the bracket because 3 is the index of the fourth value. That value gets stored in X, and henceforth, when I print X to the screen, 88 gets output because 88 was the value that was stored at index 3. Now, suppose I want to change one of the values in the array. For example, suppose I want to change the last value in the array to a new value. Once again, I'm going to type the name of the array, which is grades, followed by the index of the value I want to change. In this case, that number is 4 because that's the index of the last value. Then on the other side of the equal sign, I'm going to put the value that I want to change it to. In this case, 93. So now, instead of 83, 93 will become the value at index 4. Henceforth, when I print out that value, grades bracket 4, 93 gets output to the screen because that's the new value. It's important to know that the number of values in any array is the length of that array. For the example that we just worked on, the grades array had 5 values, so the length of the grades array is 5. Arrays have fixed length. Once the initial size is set, arrays cannot shrink or grow. Also, once arrays have been initialized, you don't have to memorize their length because all arrays store their length inside an instance variable called length. So if I wanted to use the length of the grades array in my program, I don't have to memorize that the array had 5 values. No, I could just type grades.length and that'll produce 5 for me. That'll produce whatever the length of the array was for me. In this case, that number is going to get stored inside a variable called len or len. When I print out len to the screen, 5 gets printed out because 5 is the length of the grades array. A special property about an array's length that you will certainly want to remember is that the index of the last value in an array is always equal to the length minus 1. For example, for the grades array, the length was 5 and the index of the last value was 4. Similarly, the index of the second to last value in an array will always equal the length minus 2. Similarly, the index of the third to last value in an array will always equal the length minus 3, so on and so forth. So if, for example, if I wanted to access the last value in the grades array, I wouldn't need to type 4, the exact number. I could just type the length of the array minus 1. Then, regardless of however many values are in the grades array, I know that the length minus 1 will give me the correct index for that last value. Henceforth, when I execute this line, 93 gets printed out because that's the last value in the array. Likewise, if I wanted to access the second to last value in the array, then for my index, I'm going to type length minus 2. I know I do this because I know that the length of the array minus 2 will always give me the second to last value, regardless of how many values are in the array, whether it's 5 values in the array, 20 values in the array, 1,000 values in the array, regardless. The second to last value will always be stored at the length of the array minus 2. And henceforth, when I print that value out, 88 gets output because that is the second to last value in the screen.